Are you looking to take your personal finances to the next level? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Monday Money Tip Podcast, presented by I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, with your host, Joseph Sangle.
Well, welcome to the Monday Money Tip Podcast, presented by Fully Funded Life. My name is Joseph Sangle, and we are fired up to come to you every single Monday with some right now relevant information to help you in your money journey so you can live a fully funded life. We are on episode number 212. That is 212. And this is being released on Monday, July 25th. Now, as many of you know, Megan is out with her new twin boys, and we have some guests that are joining me for the podcast. And today I am joined by my daughter, Malia. Malia, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yes, and if you're watching on YouTube, it's something very interesting. You're wearing a very red shirt that says Target. Is it because Target has decided to sponsor this podcast?
No, it's because I have work right after this.
Right, and our offices are actually near your workplace, and so you've graciously agreed to be a part of the podcast, and I want to thank you for that. Today, we're going to be continuing a series that we're offering from time to time called Money Lies. And in this series, we address common lies that we tell ourselves, and many times we believe it with all our heart, yet they are lies. And if we don't recognize that we've exchanged the truth for a lie, the belief of that lie can have devastating effects on our money journey and our ability to live a fully funded life. And the lie that we're addressing today is, I could never do that. And we're going to hear from Melea on how she bought her first house as a college student. And that's right. She bought her first house as a college student, and we're going to talk about that. Many would say, I could never do that. Yet this is a success story who has done so. So before we do that and talk details about that, we wanted to share a success story with you. And the success story today comes from Ron. And as you know, this podcast is powered by your success. We would fizzle out if we did not have success stories. And so thanks so much for everyone who shares your successes. Today's is from Ron, who went on vacation with his family and found freedom in having a vacation budget. And so we have that mini budget for the vacation planning. And Ron says, my wife planned the whole thing, and she used a budget for the first time. You would think having a budget for your vacation would be akin to wearing a straitjacket. However, we found it liberating because the budget included everything we wanted to do, so we didn't worry about how much dinner cost when we went out. In fact, we were excited if the dinner came out just a little under the estimate. We stayed within our budget and even returned home with a gift for our dog sitter. Isn't that nice?
That's very nice.
Anything that stands out to you from Ron's success story?
Just going on vacation as a college student, I know it's always like, hey, I have $100. What can I go do? And you can come up with some pretty creative and fun vacations.
It's awesome. Yeah, and just having a budget. I remember the first time I ever went on vacation with a budget, you were probably 4. And you may not have noticed the difference, but I noticed a difference on how we spent because the credit card did not come back with more on it than we had planned, and we paid it off immediately. And that was unlike previous vacations where we just spent it up and carried a balance for years. And so, Ron, thanks so much for taking time to share that. And I am excited today to talk about this series called Money Lies. And the lie that we're addressing today is, I could never do that. And many people are in this place with what has happened to home prices, saying we just can't afford a home, we can't buy a home, I could never do that. And so that's the lie that we're addressing today, because if you say, I could never do that, whatever that is, as it relates to your money journey, well, it can be a very limiting factor. And so I wanted to introduce you first. So tell everybody kind of, what you've been up to. Tell us about kind of the college you went to. What are you studying? That sort of thing.
Yeah, my name's Melea, obviously, and I go to Anderson University. I'm studying graphic design with a minor in business. I am also a track and cross country athlete, as well as president and then treasurer of the Clay Collective. So very active in my college.
What is the Clay Collective?
It's a little group that we made as the people who are in the course of ceramics that teaches people who aren't necessarily in ceramics or really enjoy ceramics but want to learn more how to be better at it in short little increments of
Yeah.
like an hour.
And I've gotten gifts from the Clay Collective for Christmas. In fact, that kind of became a funnel for gifts,
Yeah.
which is really cool. Nothing like handmade stuff, and being able to give that to people, it means a lot more. So you went to Anderson University. It needs to be clear because I grew up in the Indiana area. There's an Anderson University in Anderson, Indiana. This is the one in Anderson University in Anderson, South Carolina, which is where the worldwide global headquarters of I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, and Fully Funded Life is. And so you went to college, and when you went to college, you just graduated. By the time this released, you should have graduated, which is good. That's true, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We're a few
Wild.
weeks away from graduating. But when you went first, you chose to live on campus. In fact, I think you were required to because you were a student athlete.
I was technically required to live on campus, but that is something that can fluctuate because y'all live so close. But
You could have lived at home.
I could have lived at home because it was close.
But that sounded like a horrible option.
It sounds like a horrible option. And having to drive 30 minutes to get to practice at 5:30 in the morning, it's not a good time.
Yeah. So you chose to live on campus which years? The first and second year?
First and second, so freshman and sophomore.
And then the next year, you rented a room from a person who they own the house, their dad owned the house. How did that? Tell me what the description of that was.
It was more of a family owned the house, and they acted as the landlord, and the money coming in was just like what would cover the expenses. So
one of the children of the parents who owned the house would live in the house, and you rented out a room.
at the time that I lived there, it was two of them. So
Okay.
two of the sisters shared a room. I got my own room, and then two other people shared a room.
So this in and of itself, I think, is interesting, and I think it started a conversation with us because for our listeners, this is a unique way to approach paying for college, because if you're paying room and board anyhow, and you have multiple kids headed to college, and they're pretty much in alignment on what school they're going to go to, well, then why not buy a house near the school and let your kids live there and pay yourself the payments that you would have been paying the school or some other person, and then they can find great roommates who will pay rent on time. That's a definition of a great roommate, one of the definitions. And it can help you have an asset once you leave, once they're done, that you could sell or you could continue to rent out. So you had this moment. So you were there studying graphic design, a minor in business, and you lived in this room that you rented this third year. And then now, was that off campus? That was way off campus. How far from campus was it?
I'd say it's about the location of my house is now. It's about 5 miles off of campus. So it's enough to get off campus and be away, but it's close enough that if I wanted to ride my bike there or run there or had to get there really quickly, it'd be fine.
So at some point in time, you got it in your brain that it was time to maybe look at buying a house. So what led to that decision? What made you say, I think I would like to buy a house?
Well, the person that I lived with, originally we were really close friends, but our friendship kind of started to diminish because, don't always live with your friends. But it was still a good situation, and I'm glad that it happened because sitting there, I was like, I could do this. Because looking at it, if I had gotten, my mortgage now is less than I paid to live on campus and have half of a room in a dorm with one window, and now I own a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house.
And you have a leopard gecko?
I have 3.
Yeah. Oh, how many leopard geckos are allowed as a college student in your college dorm room?
0, and I also have 2 cats, my babies Winston and Salem.
There you go. Fantastic. And so, how many cats are you allowed in a college dorm?
Absolutely 0,
Yeah,
but
right.
You can put it in your dorm, little cabinets because they can't open them, so...
Oh. These are hacks for college students, apparently. But you made this decision. So did you go finding a house? Did you seek out a real estate agent? How did you do that?
So I had a real estate agent, Tori Sam. She's awesome. And she really helped me out and going to some crazy locations of houses I had found and wanted to look at. But I ended up finding this one just by chance, and I had been on the market for a couple months, which if you know anything about the market when I bought it, and it's still the same now, where it is very much a seller's market and things are going so quickly. And the fact that it had been on the market for a little bit kind of was a little concerning. But when I got there, I realized that this was like the perfect place to live, and the mortgage would be easily manageable. And
So you bought this house in March of 2021.
yep.
So I think it's important for those listening to understand that. And this isn't necessarily on how to buy a house, but it's one of those things where we're addressing a lie where people say, I could never do that. And I think a lot of people, when they're 21, have been living, they're living in dorm rooms and they're running up student loan debt, and they're saying, could it be, is it possible? I could never do that, buy a house.
Yeah.
So you had this moment where you were saying, hey, we need to buy a house. I want to buy a house. You started looking at houses. How many houses did you look at online? How many did you look at in person?
I looked at hundreds online, and I made so many plans to look at houses, but the problem was, like I said, things were just flying off the market. So they'd be on for maybe 6 hours and then they'd be off the website. And so I try to book places to visit and I just wouldn't be able to. So I looked at hundreds and then physically went to, I'd say about 5.
Yeah. And so when you looked at this house, what made you say, because certainly buying a house is intimidating. Tell some of the feelings that you were experiencing when you're thinking about buying a house. Because you were also looking at renting an apartment, because you were saying, hey, I need to change up my living arrangements, going into my senior year, that rents usually come up or they expire at the end of the school year. So you have to re-up or get a new one. And you're like, I'm definitely not re-upping. So, what were the feelings you were experiencing about this idea of maybe buying a house?
Absolutely terrifying, because it's kind of that, working at Target. It's not, especially part-time, fixing a house money. So it's a little scary when you're thinking, if my roof falls in, I don't know how I'm going to fix it. But at the end of the day, you have to realize what the odds are of that happening are very small, and that you can be anxious about it, but you have to let it go at some point. And I'm incredibly happy with my decision. When I went to look at the house, what really sold me on it is the fact that all the rooms are really sectioned off, and a lot of the different houses in the area had actually been turned into offices, and that it was 5 miles away from school. So I realized what I can do is either market to college students where I can give a deal for $500 a room, which is so incredibly cheap to a college student when you're getting half of a room in a dorm room where you're sharing the room, but now you have your own room. It has hardwood floors and everything. And it's only $600. And so if I rent it out, because my living room I kind of converted into a bedroom, so I have 4 bedrooms. If I rented out all 4 of them and I wasn't living there, I would easily make the mortgage, the utilities, and everything else, and it would still be a deal to the college students. Or I could rent it out to a business and they could use it as an office setting. So
how did you, you identified a house, how did you do that?
I believe it was realestate.com. I just looked at a bunch of different websites like ZipRecruiter, or not ZipRecruiter. What is it called?
You're in a job search right now.
Zillow. But I would look on there, and I would look in an area around the school, figuring out, okay, and then go to a criminology website where it would say, hey, is this a bad area? Because Anderson, it's you cross one street and it's terrible. You cross the next street, it's an amazing neighborhood. So you never know what you're going to get. So definitely checking on that.
I think you're describing a lot of towns in America.
Yeah. But just kind of making sure that it was in a safe area and that it had enough rooms and it was still close to the school. So just kind of going through criteria, and this one just kind of fit all of that.
So you found this house, then mechanically you bought the house. How did you pull that off? Like did you pay cash for the house or did you mortgage it?
It's definitely mortgage.
It's definitely a mortgage. Okay. So you paid a down payment or was it no down payment?
It was a down payment of, I think it was $7,000, or right around $7,000. And the closing costs they paid for. So that was great.
So ultimately, one of the things that happened is with this house is you had a person who had flipped this house. Mm-hmm. So this was an older home. It's one of those homes that if anybody's been underneath an old home, it's like the 2x4s are really 2 inches by 4 inches, and you can see the sawmill marks. This house is so old that it has a coal chute where coal used to be delivered to the house to heat it.
Every bedroom has a fireplace, and then in the basement there's these little doors you can open where you would clean out the soot and everything.
Yeah. It's pretty neat. And so that means it's an older home, but this person had really done an excellent renovation and made sure that it was, energy efficient, latest, greatest stuff, making sure that everything's working well in it. One of the things that you did is you got a home inspection. That you were talking about the roof falling down, like worried about that. So a home inspection is one way you're able to prevent that. Mm-hmm. And so when the home inspector went through, they give you this detailed report that says, here's the issues we've seen. Here's the things that I would be concerned about. And that allows you to speak with the seller potentially, about having those addressed. Now, in this crazy marketplace that has been existing, many people have avoided that because they have no chance of buying the house. Yep. But that seems insane. So it is insane. Yeah. Because why would you buy something that is going to be the single largest ticket purchase you've ever made in your life and not have a professional evaluation of it?
And also, I'd say buying at the top of the market would not be a good idea, especially if you're going to kind of take back on things like a home inspection and try to save money there. I would just try to rent or wait unless it's absolutely necessary, because you don't want to get this big mortgage and then your house drops in value. Because like my house actually went up in value by $50,000 or so already because the market has exploded.
Yeah. And you've been in the house more than a year. So do you still view it as a good decision?
Yes. Has it caused stress? Yes. The water company had messed up one of the numbers and tried to charge me $2,000 for water. And I kind of freaked out a little bit because I was like, if I use this much water, my house would be Noah's Ark floating down the street. So
literally.
Yeah. Because it was like 2 or 3 Olympic-sized
So they had done a typo of the wrong number.
Oh, yeah. So getting a bill like that is terrifying, but everything else has been smooth sailing. A couple issues here and there, mostly fixing like a washer and dryer or a clog sink here and there, but that's going to happen with like 4 college girls living in a house.
I avoid the place, when you have 4 college girls and 2 cats and 3 leopard geckos, it's like, okay, I'll still steer clear. I'll let you take care of that. That's awesome. So was it I was asking, do you view it as a good decision? Let's go more in detail. Mm-hmm. Was it a good financial decision? Do you think so?
Absolutely. Again, my home has only gone up in value. I now have an asset that I can use, and I'm even thinking about, because one of my roommates is moving out because she is graduating as well and moving back home to Wisconsin. And so I have an extra room available, and I'm either going to turn it into my office or I'm going to get paid about $400 to live in my own house. And so that's...
So let's unpack that real quick. Mm-hmm. So get paid $400 to live in your own house. So that means that if you had 3 roommates, they pay rent, you pay the mortgage payment, you pay your utilities, you pay your property taxes, and there's still $400 left over, and you didn't pay for any of it out of your own pocket.
Yeah, and that's the really great part is that $400 or the money that I've gotten now from having the roommates usually goes towards a little fund that I have for if something does break, because it's not really an if, it's a when. And yeah, I'd say in that regard, it's been a great decision.
Okay. So that's really good. Now, I just want all of our listeners to think about that, because a lot of times we think, I could never do that. A lot of people believe, their income is too little, that they could not buy a house. You had college student income. You're working in retail at Sam's Club, Target, Starbucks. Were there any others in the midst here? Employers? Walmart. Yep. You went to Walmart too. Yep. You went Sam's Club, Walmart, Starbucks, Target. Yep. Right. This is college student life. Yet you still purchased this house and you automatically said, I'm going to have roommates.
Yep.
Like you knew that. And you actually had verbal commitments. Did you have written commitments that they would rent from you? Or was that only after the fact, after you purchased the home?
So after I purchased the home is when I got the written agreements, or really they were enacted, because if I hadn't gotten the home, then I'm on the hook for having roommates, legally, and not having a place for them to live. So I did that afterwards. But yeah, I'd had 3 verbal commitments, and they were super excited to move in.
So I think it's important for all of our listeners who are saying, I could never do that. I could not buy a house. I could not buy a house in this market. I could not buy a house, period, in any market. I would just say, have you considered having roommates? Have you considered sharing? It's a sharing economy. Mm-hmm. We Airbnb houses. People can Airbnb they can be a host. They can Airbnb their couch. Did you know that? They can Airbnb their lawn for a tent. If it's like a place people like out in, Rapid City, South Dakota, in the Black Hills area. I have a guy who Airbnbs his yard, which is hilarious.
Whatever works.
Yeah, but so that's a good financial decision. So think about the different ways. The one way they used to say this is there's more than one way to skin a cat, which is really a weird statement when you think about it. But like that's an old statement they had said. I've never seen anybody ever skin a cat. It seems weird. But it's really saying there's more than one way to peel an apple. There's whatever it is. You may have to have roommates, but which dream is bigger? Having a house or never having roommates? So having roommates comes as a plus and comes as a minus.
Yeah, it's definitely hard living with roommates all the time. But for the most part, it's more about just learning how to get along with people, and that there are going to be conflicts and how you talk through them, and putting in a system for like chores and things, and that way people aren't getting frustrated with like the kitchen being a mess. Yeah, and also realizing that roommates aren't a forever thing. I do yearly contracts, and if I choose to, because I will be graduating and hopefully getting a job, and I'll be setting myself up for success and having a good savings, I could potentially have no roommates after the next year, or even whenever I choose after that.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of being an owner versus a renter. Is you have say when you're the owner. It comes with privileges. It also comes with responsibilities. Yeah. And it's okay to rent. It's okay to own. So what do you think? Is it more stressful to own or to rent?
Rent. So much more stressful.
Why?
To rent. Well, the reason that my friendship with my friend had kind of ended in my last one was she wasn't what I would consider a good landlord. She was younger than me and I would say less mature in some ways. And it caused a lot of conflict in the house, and not just with me. And so then you're always stressful about keeping your landlord happy, but also you kind of have to take care of yourself. And like she wanted me to clean up her dishes. And got mad when I was say, hey, but I've already cleaned up mine. And she's like, yeah, but you have to like help out the house and help everyone. And I'm like, I also vacuum and help clean the bathroom. Like I do my share of work. But she wanted me to do her stuff too. And it just wasn't acceptable to me. Yeah. And you don't really have the power to necessarily say no to some things when you're renting. And so being able to just kind of step back and not have to worry about that is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one way that you really have been able to position yourself is to be a student athlete and being able to earn scholarships that way, earning academic scholarships, enabled you to have money to be able to put towards a house at age 21. Mm-hmm. And you've now been a homeowner for 15, 16 months as of the recording of this podcast, and it's working out pretty much as planned. Yeah. By the way, interest rates have nearly doubled since then, which is a huge thing. To be able to lock in at such a low interest rate is a huge blessing as well. Yeah. Any last things you would like to share with somebody who's saying, I could never do that?
I think one thing that we haven't really addressed is how I got the down payment money. And that was from being able to go to college for free and getting the money that would have been spent on college from y'all. And I also had saved money from Sam's Club. I had like $3,000 in the bank. But I think a big struggle that a lot of people have is getting that down payment money. And so I guess I would just ask for you how you did it when you were buying your first house.
Yeah. Well, first I would say 529 college savings plans are a huge blessing.
Absolutely.
We started contributing to it when you were 4. It was our dream to help you through college. Quickly realized in about 7th or 8th grade that you had this athletic gift. You were always very intelligent academically. You put those two things together, that gave you and close to free college education. And this college savings fund had grown, and we had a deal. And the deal was, if you maintain your scholarship, that is your job, really.
Yeah.
And if you do that and you graduate, you're on pace for graduation and you're not, partying it up and all that, then this certain amount would be allocated towards, starting out in life, whether that's the down payment on a house or starting a business or whatever it was, and you chose to put it down on the house. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a lot, but it gave you a huge head start.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And so I would encourage parents, this is the accomplishment of a dream for my bride and I, for our daughter to be able to start out with no student loan debt and owning a house this early. We know that those are two things that can contribute to a person's ability to thrive financially. And so, you asked the question, how do we get the down payment for our house? Well, we actually had we had transferred from one state to another state within a business. And to help with the move, they gave us a small bonus to cover it.
Yeah.
And we used that bonus money to help for the down payment. That plus a tax refund. And it was pretty amazing.
We love tax refunds.
Yep. And so let's wrap this up. The quote for today is from Proverbs 22:6. It says, start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. That's a promise all parents hang on to. It doesn't say how old is, though. So for next episode, I'm going to have a special topic. It's another part of our series called Foundational Elements of the Ladder. And these are those things that help you when you're climbing the fully funded life ladder, have a much smoother climb up, and the ladder isn't wobbly. Because if you go to the top of a ladder, you want to make sure one thing, and that is that you have a strong, solid foundation under it. And so we're going to be talking about budgeting as a foundational element. We're not only teaching you about how to budget in this one. We've done that a couple times as an episode. This is actually going to show why this helps sustain your climb up the ladder and make sure you have the most safe, stable climb up there. I really hope you'll join us next Monday for that. And hey, if you like today's episode, please help us get this podcast so other people could benefit. You can do it by quickly rating the podcast, leaving a review, and please share your success stories on any of our social media platforms, or you can email it to us at info@iwbnin.com. That's info at iwbnin.com. If you're watching on YouTube, click the subscribe button, leave a thumbs up button there, and say, go Malia on being able to buy a house at 21. And so thanks so much for showing up on the podcast, daughter.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love you.
Love you too.
All right. Have a great Monday, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Monday Money Tip Podcast, presented by I Was Broke, Now I'm Not. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And for more great content and to stay up to date, visit iwbnin.com. We'll catch you next time.